There's no place else I could have gone and flown the former president or the Dalai Lama, the first and last astronauts to walk on the moon.
Tom, thank you so much for joining us on This is Purdue, the official university podcast. We know you're a great storyteller. We're thrilled to have you with us today. You've witnessed so many milestones with, Purdue's aviation history. You were here for 46 years as a professor, as a researcher. What do you think, the foundation and the evolution of the aviation education, why is it so special here? Tell us about the history. Walk us through everything that you've been through your time at Purdue.
Sure, and thank you for having me. It's a delight to be with you and to share some facts and some stories. I think what makes Purdue Aviation special, it really comes down to the people who formed it, created it, nurtured it, the people who teach and the staff that we have, to a person we've had really a special group, and we still do. Also, I think it's unique because of the depth of the laboratories we have. We're in one right now, and they're very extensive, and they were almost from the beginning of the department. And then I think the depth of the curricula, that's because of the faculty and because of their knowledge about aviation and the aviation industry worldwide. And then finally, the fourth part of that is the quality of the students. We have always attracted some of the best and brightest of students that come to Purdue. That's why it's a special place.
And walk us through, the biggest leaps for Purdue Aviation throughout your time at Purdue. What are some of those big milestones and achievements?
Well, I came as a student in 1967, and I came in the professional pilot program. When I came, one of the attractions was Purdue Aeronautics Corporation. The university operated an airline, a supplemental carrier, and in those days they had World War II era airplanes, DC-3s and DC-6s. And so my classmates and I learned about those airplanes, and we learned from, in part, professors who had been in the service. We flew through the airline with World War II heroes in my book. They flew bombers, they flew transports, some of them flew fighters. And they brought that knowledge and that can-do attitude with aircraft. And so we learned from them, and then while I was a student, that was discontinued and Purdue Airlines Incorporated was formed. And Purdue didn't have all of that airline, but we had Professor Emeritus, our department head, was still on the board, and there were DC-9s, and so we went to the jet age. And so my classmates and I got to learn about jets and modern aviation, if you will, as well. So that was a great leap. We had, along with that, the airline ceased actually in 1971, and the faculty looked for what can we do to replace that. And they were able to get a 707 simulator from American Airlines and started a flight engineer program. And so that was a leap. And I should say that my focus sounds like it's flight because that was, as a faculty member, what I was most associated with. But as a department head, of course, I was associated with all of the programs and value all of those. So there was the flight engineer program and the adoption of even more large-scale simulation at a time that other institutions didn't have that. And then we started flying what in essence is a corporate flight department. We had a donated twin-engine airplane in Navajo. We had surplus airplanes, Cessna 310s. That grew under Dr. Beering's leadership and support into turboprops. We had King Airs, 2 models, 4 different airplanes of King Airs, a corporate jet, and that was then traded for a brand new beach jet, another corporate jet. And so as a faculty member, a faculty captain, I flew those with our students. Those also were, in those days especially, unparalleled anywhere in the world, to have a university flight program that students actually flew those kinds of airplanes to real locations with whatever the weather of the day was. And I had the great honor of flying at least once with all the presidents from Dr. Hovde through President Daniels, at least once, all of them. And so that was a great career piece as well. And then I think probably, certainly our aeronautical engineering technology program has grown. Great faculty, great students, and great laboratories there. And we're sitting, as I said, in one right now. And so this engine that's right next to us, it's pretty much state of the art, and that depth of and amount of engines surrounding us. There's an airframe laboratory in another hangar that's similarly very well equipped, growth into electronics. So all of those things have been great leaps and have kept us at the forefront. And I think finally it's the growth in the number of students that we have. When I first came, my class was a large class and there were 26 of us. Well, now there's a lot more than that. And so all of those things were leaps, I think.
Absolutely. And you shared a little bit about the growth of different programs. Can you just share a brief overview of some of the programs Purdue offers within aviation?
Sure. I spoke of Aeronautical Engineering Technology, or AET. That is the current manifestation of what started as the first program in aviation that Jim Maris started way back in the mid-1950s. And it's a great program. It produces highly qualified technicians that are valued not only in aviation, but in a lot of other fields as well because of their expertise and knowledge. Aviation management, professional flight, and then UAS, unpiloted aeronautical systems. And then I should also make a leap here. One of the leaps we had was graduate education. In the early days of the College of Technology or the School of Technology, it was all undergraduate for the most part. And as we grew as a department and then now as a school within the college, graduate education is an important piece as well, both master's and PhD level.
Absolutely. And how is all of that history of these former Purdue aviation programs, how has that provided the foundation for where we are today and how successful everything going on here at Purdue is today?
Well, if you go back to the very beginning and look at that Purdue Aeronautics Corporation development, there was a gentleman named Grove Webster who in World War II was brought here from Washington as a part of the civilian pilot training program. And Jerry Goldman, who became a dear friend of mine, who was the director of flight operations, chief pilot then director of flight operations for PAC and Purdue Airlines, they had a dream of, if we have a professional pilot program, why don't we have an airline for them to learn in if they're going to be airline pilots? Just like for medical school, having a teaching hospital. And so that's what that airline was about. That's what those corporate airplanes were about. And that was the foundation, if you will. And Jim Maris was a magnificent leader. He was a World War II hero. He hired me twice, and a number of other people of my era. And he was able to do things on a shoestring. We had early American everything, but we made it work. And each one of those labs developed and got better and better, bigger and bigger. And that's where we are now. And so, with the vision and the ability to do a lot with very little for a long time, that allowed us to create things, as I said earlier, that we were almost without peer.
And you touched on this a little bit, but the experiential learning at Purdue is super important and key to the aviation programs. How do these simulation centers, and we'll have some videos of them later, but how do these centers at Purdue make our aviation program stand out from other institutions?
Well, it's the degree of simulation and the fidelity, it's called, of simulation. There are different levels of simulation, and they're computers that drive a cockpit with instruments and visuals. And so our students come and fly with general aviation airplanes. They start with single engine airplanes. They work their way up through multi-engine airplanes. And then with the large scale simulators, now they're going to be flying jets, whether it's a Boeing airplane or an Airbus airplane or whether it's a Hawker corporate airplane. It's back sort of to that same, without having an airline, having that same teaching hospital idea. They've already seen airline quality equipment. They've already flown a simulator that feels exactly like the airplane. they have a depth of knowledge of systems that I think is probably true that very few of our peer institutions have.
Right.
They also have great programs as well, but that depth of knowledge and that experience before they actually get out into the airline world makes them leaders throughout their career. And that's another key, I think, because we're at Purdue, because it's a great world-class research institution and a great Big Ten school. The students not only have the aviation expertise and knowledge, but they're taught physics by a physics professor, and they're taught math by a math professor, and English by an English professor, and so forth. And they get to see great Big Ten sports as well. And I think that we create not just technicians, but we create leaders. And that's a lifelong, career-long capability and foundation that is pretty rare.
I love that, and it's that like well-rounded experience as a student. You have the balance of athletics with the academics that are, rigorous and tough. How do you think Purdue Aviation's work, research, and education has affected this whole industry for the better when you look back and reflect?
Well, again, I think the fact that we've provided the industry with the quality of graduates that we have, and we have a wonderful reputation. Our graduates typically wear lanyards, for their identification that say Purdue University, and lots of boiler up and go boilers and that kind of thing. But when they walk into a cockpit, or if they're a technician, that Purdue degree says so much. And that's part of what we've done is the quality of what we've prepared them for. The research part is newer, but we've some of our AET professors in particular are really expert on alternative fuels. There's concern with carbon impact of aviation, with sustainable fuels. And when you put a fuel in an airplane, it has to pass a lot of rigorous tests to be sure that when you get to altitude, something unforeseen doesn't happen in the fuel system or the engines. And so that's a very orderly process, and we have some professors that are really, I think, at the forefront and making a difference. Human factors, particularly in the flight area, we have professors that are doing human factors and how people learn, how people interact in the cockpit, those kinds of things. And it's growing as we grow the research and the graduate program.
Absolutely. I know Donna Beering, the former President Beering's daughter-in-law, she said, you shouldn't be excited that I'm a female pilot, you should be excited that I'm a Purdue pilot. So that touches on what you just shared there. So I know you have a lot of fun stories to tell. You told us, you've flown all of these different Purdue presidents. What are some other favorite memories? You've flown Coach Joe Tiller, President Jimmy Carter, the Dalai Lama. Tell us about some of those stories, reflecting back on your career here at Purdue.
Sure. Well, let me first say that again, I've talked about Dr. Beering a little bit, and he was hugely impactful on supporting aviation education. He was hugely impacted with the support of all of Purdue. But he's, was an MD. He was in the Air Force. He was a physician to the original 7 astronauts. And so he knew lots about aviation, and he valued it. And he knew the value of having aircraft to take key people to key places on Purdue business, while also being a laboratory for our graduates. And so we flew Dr. Beering and Mrs. Beering, wonderful people and wonderful ambassadors for Purdue. And they treated us like family. And so, particularly in the Tiller days, when every year we went to a bowl game, we had 3 turbine airplanes and 3 captains and co-pilots. And we almost always had all the airplanes there. And they treated us, again, like family. And so they insisted that we would eat together many times, or we went to alumni programs. When we took Dr. Beering to games, he had great tickets, and he always made sure we had great seats, and just fabulous people, and a wonderful opportunity. You mentioned several noted people. The Dalai Lama you know, when we saw that we were going to be providing transportation service for him, we picked him and his group up at Bloomington, and Indiana, that is, at that other school. And we had to be vetted by the State Department, and their security people were there. They knew all about us, I guess. And we were taught some protocols. And one of the protocols was that we were not to shake hands with His Holiness, or not to touch him or anything like that, you know, and we were taught how to properly do this as we met him. And they said, you can only shake hands with him if he puts his hand out. And I was the one that brought him here, and my colleague brought some of his other group. I had him and his brother on my airplane. And you might find this interesting, or the listeners might, that they had the other airplane, they had me take off first because they were concerned about security. After he got to the airplane, the head of security asked me how soon I could get him in the air. And so I said about 5 minutes, and he said, okay. So I took off, and it was a cloudy day, so we entered the clouds and we disappeared, and then my colleague took off with the other group. And we were told that en route, since I took off first, he was supposed to land first. Just like with the President of the United States, they have 4 helicopters and you don't know which one he's on.
Right.
And so in case somebody was here for security, and so we did that. And that was an interesting thing, working with the controllers, because I was ahead and I had to be brought out, that my colleague brought around. But anyway, when I met him, first thing he did was smile and bow and shake my hand.
Oh.
When we got here, and I shut the engines down and I had to go open the door, I walked by him and he put his hand up like this and took my hand. And then when he got off, he shook hands with me again. And so I don't know if I ever did bow, but I got to shake hands with him.
Oh, that's
He was a
incredible.
wonderful passenger and a great person. And Jimmy Carter, wonderful statesman too. And that same colleague actually picked him up in Chicago and brought him here to speak, and then I took him home to Georgia after he spoke. And there we had to be vetted by the Secret Service, you know, and we had to put the airplane in a hangar and it had to be secure. When he came here, there was a huge cavalcade of cars, limos from the Hall of Music where he'd spoken, police cars, flashing lights, and my co-pilot and I were standing kind of at attention by the airplane. Dr. Beering introduced him to both of us. And then he met with and shook hands with all the people that had served him for his visit. And I thought that was fabulous. We got in the airplane. Our chief of maintenance closed the door and made sure it was secure. Started the engines. Within 5 minutes there, I think we were airborne. And that airplane was the first jet we had. It was a little slow in climbing. It was a little slow airspeed-wise. We still went above 30,000, but we got a direct clearance, which we would have never gotten, all the way direct to our destination. Of course, it was close to midnight, but I think because the tower stayed open, I think they told the controllers, who told each controller ahead of time, that we had Mr. Carter on board. Mm-hmm. And the final thought with him, as tired as he was, and he looked pretty tired, but we had 2 Secret Service agents that rode with us, heavily armed. And when we got there, the Secret Service agents opened the door, which I really didn't want them to do. I wanted to open the door just because that's protocol. And they had him halfway to the Suburban that's always there where a former president is. And I thought, gee, we didn't get to tell him what an honor it was to meet him and get to fly him. And my co-pilot and I scrambled out, and he got halfway to the Suburban and he turned back and he came in and he called us both by name. And I thought, here's a man that's, you know, been in the most powerful position in the world, and he remembered a poor old country professor and an important student, but pretty spectacular individual.
That's incredible.
And it was an incredible opportunity.
Absolutely. So you've done a great job of sharing these stories and telling us already, but why is Purdue so special to you? Why did you stay here for decades? I'm sure you had other opportunities. What does this place mean to you?
Well, you know, the things that I've described, and if I told you all the stories, we'd be here till Sunday. But like a lot of Boilermaker folks, I bleed black and gold. And, you know, to be an aviation educator, to do what I wanted to do, and to try to make a difference in the lives of young people I care about, there is no place else I could have gone that would even have come close. But there's no place else I could have gone and flown the former president or the Dalai Lama, the first and last astronauts to walk on the moon, and so many others. I couldn't have gone anywhere else. And if I had opportunities to apply and probably to be hired elsewhere, but I knew if I went, my heart wouldn't be there. It would be back here, and that wouldn't be fair. There was a period there where my wife said, "Why don't you go somewhere and be a dean?" And I could have done that. I was a department head, and the next step is to be a dean. And my answer there was, it's too far from the smell of jet fuel, you know?
Yeah.
I have a cup that says, "I love the smell of jet fuel in the morning," and I'd be too far from the airplanes, because if you're a dean, you just can't do that.
Do you have any stories of students coming back? I mean, you've taught thousands and thousands of students. Do you have any special stories or people who have come back to you and said, you know, Professor Carney, I would have never gotten these opportunities if you hadn't been with me and teaching me all along?
A lot, yeah. And not just me, we all do.
Yeah.
I had one just a couple of days ago for a senior United Airline captain I call them my kids. Yeah, they do. And it means the world to me. And I try to say, you know, the true reward of what all of us here at Purdue who are professors, the true reward, I think, is in the lives and the success of our students. And so I just tell them thanks, you know, for being the great and wonderful people they are, citizens and practitioners. That's the reward. And yeah, you hear that a lot. My other, not just piloting, but aviation weather is my other discipline, if you will. And so I have a love-hate affair with the atmosphere, but mostly love. And teaching people how to fly safely in weather, or how to know it's not safe, don't go, is really at the core of what I did in my teaching. And if you have a student come back and say, you know, you told me something that at the time I thought, why are you bothering to tell me that? And it really made a difference. That really means a lot.
Absolutely. What would you say your next giant leap is?
Well, I've been retired from Purdue since the end of the fall semester of 2018. My wife would tell you that I failed miserably at retirement because I've been busy. I just completed a 5-year tour, if you will, as the Vice President of Accreditation for the Aviation Accreditation Board International, and that was about 120% job effort, but it was another labor of love. And so now it's time to really be retired. We have 3 wonderful daughters and their families. I'm going to spend more time with them. I married my best friend and high school sweetheart, and I want to spend even more time with her with the time we have left. And so that's what we're going to do. A lot more of waking up in the morning and designing our day, as opposed to having time constraints.
I love that. Well, we can't thank you enough for joining us. This has been really special. I really have enjoyed your stories. Is there anything else that I missed that you want to share with our listeners?
No, I don't think so. I've appreciated your questions and your patience with my responses, and it's been an honor and a pleasure, so thank you very much.
Thank you.